Gustavo signed a termination in 10 minutes and took 3 months to realize he had ruined himself. He had run the company he inherited from his father for 3 years, and he hated making hard calls. He preferred to delegate them, sign them fast, and never think about them again. One Monday morning, accounting discovered a serious error in the billing system. A duplicate invoice for nearly $200,000 had reached the company's biggest client. Fair Distribution, that client, accounted for almost half of the company's yearly revenue. Their director called furious that same morning and threatened to cancel the contract immediately. Gustavo needed someone to blame before Friday's meeting with the board of directors. He asked his assistant for a short list of possible people responsible in that area. She handed him a paper with 2 names highlighted in yellow, with no further explanation. The first was Diego Salas, a financial analyst, the one who arrived first and left last every day. The second was Bruno Ferreira, his own nephew, hired the previous year on a family recommendation. Bruno had spent weeks arriving late, leaving early, and approving documents without really checking them. Human Resources had left a handwritten note beside the names, almost unreadable in the rush. It said, in short, check the likely responsible party first, initials B. Ferreira. Gustavo had 5 minutes before another meeting and read the paper far too quickly. He saw a last name that started like the one he was looking for and stopped reading there. He called Diego into his office that same afternoon, with no warning and no real explanation. He told him the company no longer needed his services, effective immediately, for poor performance. Diego did not argue, did not raise his voice, only asked for 24 hours to organize his files. Gustavo refused and added that security would walk him out in 10 minutes. His co-workers looked at each other, completely unable to understand what was happening. To everyone, Diego was the most reliable and least difficult employee on the whole floor. No one dared to ask questions, and Gustavo left no room for any either. Bruno, meanwhile, celebrated with 2 co-workers at the coffee shop on the corner without a trace of guilt. What no one in the office mentioned was one small detail that would decide everything that followed. For nearly 2 years, Diego had been, in practice, the only person who understood the billing system. He had built it himself, on his own time, because the official software never fully worked. No one else had the full passwords, the manuals, or the patience to understand those linked spreadsheets. Diego had offered to document it 3 times, and 3 times Gustavo said there was no budget for that. So everything stayed locked inside one person's head, a person now being escorted to the door. Tuesday morning, the billing system froze completely without any warning at all. No one could issue a new invoice, let alone fix the one that had triggered the crisis with Ferrer. The head of IT called Diego 4 times that morning, and 4 times it went straight to voicemail. Nervous, Gustavo asked Bruno to look into the problem, since he was the other name on that list. Bruno opened the program, stared at a screen full of formulas for half an hour, and understood nothing. He said, completely calm, that the whole thing seemed to have no short-term solution at all. Wednesday afternoon, Fair Distribution sent a formal email to the entire leadership team. They were terminating the contract effective immediately, citing repeated failures and 0 technical response. The board of directors found out before Gustavo himself did, from a hidden copy on that very email. They moved Friday's meeting up to Thursday and demanded an immediate written explanation. Desperate, Gustavo called Diego that same night to offer him triple his old salary to come back. Diego listened to all of it calmly, without interrupting, until Gustavo finally finished talking. Then he said he no longer worked for anyone who couldn't read a list of 2 names properly. He hung up without yelling, without insults, without giving Gustavo the satisfaction of a long argument. That same afternoon, even before that call, Diego had received a completely different one. It was the head of purchasing at Fair Distribution, a number he recognized right away. For 2 years, unknown to most people in his own office, they had quietly handled every urgent fix together. The director knew exactly who actually solved the real problems behind every invoice fixed on time. He made a simple offer, worked directly for them, as an outside consultant, with no clumsy middlemen. Diego thought it over for a single night and said yes the very next morning, without much hesitation. In under a month, he founded his own small consulting firm, with 2 desks and 1 rented server. Without really planning it, he took with him what had been his old boss's single biggest client. That Thursday, the board went through 2 years of billing errors with a fine-tooth comb. They found that Bruno had been approving invoices without review since his very first month on the job. They also found 3 prior warnings from human resources about his performance, all ignored by Gustavo. On top of that, they found the original handwritten note, the one clearly saying check B, Ferreira first. Someone asked, out loud and in front of everyone, why Diego Salas had been fired at all. Gustavo had no answer that sounded reasonable, not even to himself. The very board he had feared facing on Friday voted, that Thursday, to remove him from leadership. They offered him a symbolic title, outside advisor with no real authority, a polite way to push him out. Bruno resigned 2 weeks later, embarrassed, without anyone asking him to directly. The company took 4 months to find another provider who could understand a system nobody had ever documented. In that process, it lost 2 more clients, both citing slow responses and repeated billing mistakes. Diego, meanwhile, hired as his first employees 2 people from his old office, also fired without real cause. Months later, his small consulting firm billed more in 1 quarter than his entire old yearly salary. Gustavo wrote to him once, months later, a long message apologizing and asking for a second chance. Diego read it all the way through. He told a former coworker later, but never replied a single word. Not out of resentment, he said, but because he had nothing left to prove to that man. Gustavo's company still runs today, smaller, slower, without the client that used to hold it up. Sometimes the person you sacrifice to save appearances is the only one holding everything together. And sometimes, reading a list carefully before you sign, it is the difference between a mistake and a collapse. This story is fiction, but the danger of deciding without looking twice is completely real. If this story reached you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow there's another one you won't forget either.